Well, I mean, we all have thoughts, right? We all have thoughts swimming through our head all the time. Maybe starting there, because it seems like that's the main thing you're tying right away to somebody who's out there listening is intrusive thoughts and obsessive compulsive disorder. So what are intrusive thoughts?
I think something to keep in mind, and it may be helpful for me to differentiate between just intrusive thoughts that we all experience versus intrusive thoughts and kind of an OCD diagnosis. So I always tell people we all get intrusive thoughts. Somebody without OCD, their brain is allowing that thought to come in and they're able to say, oh, that's weird, and then go about their day. An example I give is I had an intrusive thought one time when my foot was on the brake and I was at Fry's and this older gentleman was passing in front of my car. And my brain, I do not have OCD, and my brain said, oh gosh, what if you hit the gas right now and hit him? And I was like, oh goodness, that's ridiculous. And then I parked my car and I went in and got my groceries. Somebody with OCD, what's going to happen is if they would get that same intrusive thought, their brain attaches meaning to that thought and has this sense of urgency to resolve it. And so if somebody had that same experience with OCD, their brain would be like, oh my gosh, why would you have that thought? You're a horrible person. Why would you even think that? And then they'd park their car and then maybe they'd check to make sure they didn't run over the older gentleman. And then maybe they'd circle the block. Maybe they'd look for the older gentleman. Maybe they would turn on the TV late at night to see if it was in the news that somebody was hit. There's no resolution. It's just ongoing. It's never enough. Searching for that certainty that they didn't run over this gentleman.
Wow. So it almost seems like what you're saying is that the intrusive thought is just the stimulus. It's the thing that sets it off.
It's the trigger.
It's the urgency to resolve it that is really
it becomes a compulsion.
Those repetitive thoughts. Wow.
Yes. And so the person would be maybe doing some physical compulsions in that example, but they would do some internal compulsions. So they'd be providing themselves tons of reassurance, possibly. They'd be convincing themselves, I'm a good person. I'm a good person. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. They would be mental reviewing the past, or they would be, oh goodness, it's endless. They would be going through the whole motion of the experience. Wait, I didn't hear anything with my car. And so I think we're good here. Tons of rumination.
Just replaying it over.
So when we talk about rumination, that's any type of problem solving. And so any type of search for that relief. And so that one and then self-reassurance oftentimes will tag team each other, so to speak, at the same moment back and forth.
Yeah. And so I mean, how does it, for that person out here that's trying to understand it, like, does it resolve at any point? Because, I mean, the initial example you threw out to us was what people think of more as like, you know, like locking the door over and over, or washing your hands over and over. But you're saying that there's internal and an external. Mm-hmm. There's things you do, but then there's also a thought process that's happening over and over. Is there resolution?
So I would say, in my experience, it depends. And I would be curious what we define as resolution, right? One compulsion, so a compulsion is any type of relief that the person is getting caused by the fear. So oftentimes, well, not oftentimes, primarily all the time, they're going to be having to do so many different compulsions over time just to get that relief. So I've seen where maybe somebody's triggered and they've done 20 compulsions and maybe they feel okay about the situation. And then their brain is like, okay, well, this trigger is more important. And so then it moves to another fear. Right. And maybe they're feeling okay about that past thing, but this new fear is the primary. But I've also seen in situations, and I'm not even exaggerating, I remember treating someone one time that was triggered by something when they were in high school, and I met them when they were close to 50 years old. And that one trigger terrorized them their entire life.
They were continuing to try to resolve it.
Continue to look for that relief. And that one in particular was in regards to something called false memory OCD, where they were convinced that they had done something horrible. And so it was all mental rituals. And for this person, it took them Googling their symptoms to figure out what was happening.
Okay. And isn't it true that people who do struggle with OCD, they don't want, the compulsions are not wanted. They're
looking, well, for the obsessions. So the obsessions are the fears, worries, and doubts. And so they oftentimes are trying to stop their obsessions, and they're trying to stop that uncomfortable emotion that comes.
Right.
It's important, I think, to also understand that with OCD, the person feels anxiety oftentimes, but they also feel a lot of other uncomfortable emotions. So guilt, shame, distress, fear, all of those different things are happening. And then they feel compelled that they have to do the compulsion. People are looking for any sort of relief, but they don't want to wash their hands hundreds of times a day. They don't want to shower 10 hours. They don't want to, but their brains are saying you have to, or you're not going to feel better. Like, this is the only option.
And then that's just the pattern.
Yes.
That completely wreck it.
Yep. So at the beginning of treatment, we do lots of psychoed, and people learn that the obsessions and the anxiety are not the problem. The compulsions are the problem in this OCD cycle that we build for them. And so they realize that they can have a different relationship with their obsessions, different relationship with those uncomfortable emotions, and ride it out without doing that behavior. And when I say behavior, mental and physical.